Picture yourself playing 2014's indie darling, This War of Mine. Things are not going well in your group of survivors. One of you is sick, another is hungry, and you've just lost a third member to soldiers in the construction yard. If you don't find medicine soon, you may lose one or possibly both of your remaining people. But then you look at the list of places to scavenge from, and you remember one. An unguarded house occupied by an elderly couple and their child. Suddenly, you're struck with a dilemma. Do you hope that there's something in the construction yard where Pavlo just died that you can use? Or do you steal from these defenseless people to ensure that your survivors are safe and fed?
I'll bet that those of you who are watching will have a very different reaction to this choice. Some of you will agonize over it for a whole minute before finally making your decision, unsure if you're making the right call. Some of you will rob them, feeling very adamant in your survival of all cost mindset. Some of you will groan as you remember that you already robbed them the first chance you got, because come on, how many games give you the chance to steal from defenseless old people?
Regardless of what you thought of the choice, it was put there to elicit a specific reaction out of you. Moral choices aren't just putting games to add another line on its store page. They are putting games to elicit a certain kind of reaction, one that varies from game to game.
There are a lot of different types of moral choices that exist in games, for a lot of different reasons. A moral choice with an obvious good or evil option can be there to reaffirm your morals as a player. If you always go for the light side option in Knights of the Old Republic, then congratulations, you value the concept of good more than evil. If you didn't nuke the settlement of Megaton in 2008's Fallout 3, then congratulations, you're a good enough person not to destroy an entire town for a penthouse apartment. If you didn't choose to wish for more money at the end of Fable 2, then pop some champagne because your morals are strong enough that you value either the lives of thousands of enslaved citizens or your dog more than money. And for the record, the right choice is absolutely your dog.
Meanwhile, a less clear choice can be there to challenge your morals and get you to ask questions about them. In Fallout New Vegas, the New California Republic definitely have the moral high ground to the brutal Caesar's Legion. However, the Republic is unreliable and inefficient, while the Legion's brutal authoritarian tactics are effective in keeping the roads safe and the wasteland secure, at least for those who aren't being crucified. In the latter half of Fable 3, you're asked to make decisions for the kingdom between options that will cause hardship for your citizens and grow the treasury, or options that will benefit your citizens but leave the kingdom broke. To complicate matters, the kingdom is facing a potentially devastating threat and will need funds to fight it off. Do you impose hardships on your citizens in order to ensure their safety in the coming times, or do you give your citizens the best lives you can, knowing they won't be safe when danger strikes?
These kinds of moral decisions can cause players discomfort. According to a study called Mirrored Morality, an exploration of moral choice in video games, players often feel guilt for behaving in antisocial ways. If a player does something antisocial after deducing that is the right thing to do, they will typically feel guilty about it. And for a game like This War of Mine, that's exactly the point. In This War of Mine, the purpose for the moral choices is to force players to question their morals and to focus on the discomfort that such reflection brings. By having the player do so, the game can convey the emotional toll of warfare.
A similar game in execution is 2013's Paper, Please. In this game, players control an officer on the border of a fictional state and have to check people's paperwork to make sure it's in order for them to cross. Complications arise when players encounter someone who messed up on one small part of the paperwork but need to get inside to see their family, or someone who can't cross legally but is trying to escape someone who wants to kill them. Do you bend the rules for this person in need and take a pay cut, or enforce them so you can feed your family at home? The tough moral choices in the game take on emotional toll on the player, showing them the hardship of being in such a position, giving the player some perspective when it comes to people they might think of as heartless government drones.
However, there's one big problem. Say I'm playing Baldur's Gate, a role-playing game where the player can create any kind of character they want to. I decide that I want to play as Daggers McCree, a sword-waving, treasure-stealing jackass who thinks only of himself, has no moral boundaries when it comes to gaining power, and gets into bar fights for fun. When the time comes for Daggers McCree to make a moral decision, the answer to me is simple. However, it's not my morals that are on the scales here. If Daggers McCree makes a simple black and white moral decision, my morals aren't going to be reaffirmed. If Mr. McCree has to make a tough moral decision, I'm not going to be examining my morals. I'm going to be examining his. And finally, if for some reason I decide to roleplay Daggers McCree as the omnipotent leader of my band of survivors in this war of mine, he sure as hell wouldn't be feeling any emotional toll from robbing the defenseless elderly couple. In fact, it'd probably be the first place he'd visit.
Papers, Please kind of falls apart a bit in this regard. It's very easy to play the game purely strategically, and the moral choices lose some of their impacts if you don't impart your own morals onto them as you play. Don't get me wrong, it's still a very good game and very impactful under the right circumstances, but this is a problem with it.
So with all that in mind, how can this war of mine get the emotional toll of warfare to a player who'd blow up a small town for money?
In this war of mine, the performance of your characters is affected by a series of status effects. If they go too long without eating, they become hungry. If you don't heat the house and keep the temperature above 15 degrees Celsius, they become sick or even freeze to death during the cold winter. If they go too long without sleeping, they become tired. These status ailments will cause your characters to move and perform actions more slowly, compound to make other status ailments worse, and potentially kill the character. These are all fairly standard status effects for a survival game, but there is one that sets this war of mine apart. Characters have a hidden sympathy stat, and if characters with moderate or high sympathy witness another character undergoing hardship, they will become sad, and this will compound with other status effects just like a physical ailment. Now here's where this gets interesting. If a character with a high sympathy level acts in a way that hurts others, they also become sad, and this includes making moral choices.
This means that if a character behaves in a way that goes against their own morals, it simulates the effect that this has on a player who puts their own morals into a game when making moral decisions. Because of this, there's no escape from the emotional turmoil of war. Even if the player is playing purely strategically or role-playing Daggers McCree, for example, their decisions will be causing emotional hardship to their characters, and that will manifest as consequences in the gameplay. This ensures that even if the player isn't feeling that themselves, the emotional turmoil of the war is still being shown to them through the in-game individuals.
This is by no means a perfect solution, seeing that Marco is feeling sad about refusing to help an old man get medicine, for his child is not as powerful as the guilt you feeling yourself. However, it's more effective than leaving it up to the player to feel guilty for their own actions. At the end of the day, it is a video game, and nobody's actually getting hurt when Dagger McGee finally snaps and murders everyone in Whiterun.